Get ready to skyrocket your business and experience exponential growth. Welcome to Grow with Gary, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate the ins and outs of business and entrepreneurship, bringing you compelling guest interviews with business experts, offering actionable insights and inspiring stories that humanize success. So grab your colleagues and get ready to unlock the secrets to success. Now, here's your host, business coach and owner of MICU Growth, Gary MICU Jr.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Grow with Gary, Modern Life and Business. Of course, I'm your host, Coach Gary, and we have an extremely special guest with us here today, Chris, who's going to share his experience and his journey. And I want to really dive in and go deep with him because he has an incredible experience. So without any further ado, I'm going to just kick it right over. Chris, if you want to tell us just a tad about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, my name's Chris Staffeldt. First off, thanks, Gary, for having me on the episode.
Of course, thank you.
My name is Chris Staffeldt. I am the founder of Life Edge, and we are a platform that vet out online courses and coaches. And prior to that, I was a welder for a long time and realized I needed to make a change and decided to go start a online platform.
Awesome. And we'll dig into some of that change because I think that's a bit of a shift, right? Going from very hands-on, a very high skill trade into then something digital. So we'll dive into that, and I'm very excited to explore that piece, especially that transition for you. So as we do here on the show, we're going to start right off way back in time into some childhood. So I'm wondering, as you're going through, and obviously your journey has had some change within it, what would be, in your opinion, some of the earliest experiences that sparked an interest or a desire to do entrepreneurship?
Mm-hmm. So growing up, when I was younger, I did a lot of work with my dad. My dad was in construction. And so I have a lot of these early memories of being 8, 9, 10 years old and just being on the weekends going to work with my dad. And he would pay us, me and my brothers, to like go pick up pallets and stuff and collect a bunch of stuff to help clean up just to like, and we got paid, I don't know, I was making like $3 a day, but I didn't care. I was getting to go to work with my dad and I was getting paid. And
yes, absolutely.
So as I got older, though, getting into high school, we didn't get allowance or anything. So we had to go earn money if we wanted to go to the movies, buy anything, video games, whatever. And I was big into cars. And so I started a landscaping business, and it started out just pushing a mower up and down my neighborhood, mowing the neighbors' yards, $5 here, $10 here. And I actually, by the time I was 13, raised enough money to buy my first car. I was like 13 and a half when I bought my first car because like I said, I was big into cars. And so that was like the first time that I realized, hey, you can go earn money and you can build this business. But I kind of lost track of that. The business was great. I carried it all through high school. Eventually, as I started driving, I expanded the amount of houses and people I was serving.
Sure,
but then I followed essentially what the counselor was saying, which is graduate from high school and then either go to college. And I went to trade school. Like I said, I went off to become a welder. So that to me is probably where like the seed was planted, but it didn't really sprout much from that.
Okay. And so having that business, right, was it a bit of a shock to hear the counselor say, hey, you really need to go to school, you need to do follow on continuing education, right? Or did it maybe make more sense, like, why am I closing this business down? It's already working. Did you have any of those thoughts?
No, at the time I was essentially bought into the programming that the school had put into me for 18 years of, well, you go to school and then you do this, then you do this. And that's the only way you're going to survive the rest of your life is if you go through our system and jump through our hoops. And so it wasn't a shock. And at the time, I just didn't have anyone around me as like a
Mhm.
mentor or somebody that was speaking some truth into my life. Like, hey, what you got going on is pretty good here. Maybe you should try this. And
Okay.
I can't beat it. I went to school to learn a trade. So like I did learn a valuable skill that I was able
Yes.
to put into the
Absolutely.
workforce. So it's
Okay. Okay. Good. And like you said, right? It wasn't, a degree and some obscure, thought process, right? Welding's an extremely advantageous skill to have, and well paying at that. But still within that structure of pushing through, and the counselor setting you down that traditional track, we'll call it. So then, if you had it, so you had this, the seed had been planted, but it hadn't
mm,
quite sprouted yet. And you went this other track. When would you say is sort of that pivotal moment where, if there is one, that it stood out to you, and maybe it was an aha, maybe it was a slow progression where you realized, I need to do something different. I need to
mm.
take more control, and brought you back then to your entrepreneurial roots that you had, back from all the way back to 13.
Yeah, so it was essentially it started out as a slow progression that ended with a
Mm.
slap in the face.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was like, you're going to change or else. And so
Wow.
after I got out of trade school, I went into building custom cars. I did that for a couple years. Like I said, interested in cars.
Yes.
I
Yes.
I did that for about 4 years. Moved up, did very well doing that. But then I was just kind of tired of. This was all during the financial crisis of
Okay.
08, 09. And I was tired of chasing a paycheck essentially. And so I
Mm.
wanted something a little more stable, a little more secure, something I could raise a family on or build a family on. And I went
Sure.
into production welding. I essentially became an entrepreneur where I met a guy who had a great idea. He just needed somebody who was driven and willing to do some hard work. And for about 10 years, I worked at this company, and it went from being nothing to being a multi-million dollar manufacturing company. And
Wow.
I
Okay.
grew in the company. I learned about business. I learned about a lot of things. The problem was the further along I got down that track, the further I realized this was not for me, and that I had a
Mm.
whole
Okay.
lot more to offer the world, and that I wasn't living up to my full potential. And so I started to realize a lot of that. And then that was the slow progression. The slap in the face came when it was about 27, 28 years old. And my wife said, hey, this job is not working for us. I'm losing my
Mm.
husband. You're not who you used to be. Either you leave or we're not going to be together in the future. And I was like, I
Wow.
guess
Wow.
I guess it's time for me to make a change. So that
Yes.
was the initial slap in the face that was the major catalyst for the shift.
Okay, okay. So it was the progression of seeing the changes, and you weren't happy, and your wife wasn't happy with the changes, and realizing that, okay, something maybe needs to happen, but then that ultimatum of sorts,
Yeah,
really
so
then.
with the business, it was so much fun the first few years. Like the
Hmm.
first 3 to 4 years, it was like we were cowboys and we were just
Okay.
constantly growing, and there was so much happening and so many
Yes.
just like decisions that had to be made, and things you could get away with that you couldn't do as the company continued to grow. Once it got
Sure.
above 10 to 15 employees, you have to start thinking about rules and regulations and safety and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it removed that, like, that excitement. It just became a boring company at that point. Now,
Okay.
it was great
Okay.
for the owners, but for somebody who thrives on constant, like, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I like going fast. I like jumping out of planes. I enjoy uh, the entrepreneurship of what was
Yes. The
going
high
on. But
pace.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then once that kind of fizzled out, I didn't feel like there was much more purpose for me in that
Mm.
position.
Okay. And then I'm wondering too, is since you said you were an entrepreneur, and I know there's many listeners who probably would fit into that category of being an intrapreneur, working with inside of another company and helping it grow. Was there a component where maybe you were missing equity, or something like that, that also was drawing you out to, I need to make my own thing?
Yeah, I had realized that, how do I say this? I started learning more about business. So
Hmm.
once things started slowing down, I was like, okay, I need to start really thinking about my future. I could see the next 30
Okay.
years of where I was going to be. And we didn't have equity in the company. We didn't have options. We didn't have 401ks. We had a very
Okay.
decent salary. But I was like, I've got 30 more years of my working life left at least. Is this what I'm going to spend the next 30 years doing? And I knew, so there's been something, even since going all the way back to being 13 years old, I knew I had a lot of potential. And after
Mm.
that first 5-year period at that other company, I was using my abilities and growing my potential, and I kept growing. But then the opportunity within that company for me fizzled out. And so
Oh,
there
okay.
was just a lot of these tensions that I needed to exercise and figure out what it was that was going to work for me. And it wasn't staying in that company. I knew for a fact that
Got
it
it.
wasn't staying
Got it.
there.
Okay, understood. And I'm thinking then too, as you're seeing these, you're seeing the tension, and there's probably challenges and adversity too that's coming along, whether within work or outside influences. And wondering then, what maybe were some of those challenges? How did you come to realize them as such, and then eventually overcome them to get to where you are now?
So let me clarify the question. You're asking what were some of the challenges of leaving and then ending up
It
starting?
could be from leaving, it could be from other points in your career. But certainly we all face adversity at points in our
Yeah.
lives. And some stand out, I think, above the rest.
Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges is giving up like a fantastic paying job, right? Do you
Mhm.
have
Sure.
secure money that's coming in and you're going to go out on your own and do what? And at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do. So that was another challenge,
Ah,
was there was no clear path. It wasn't like I had started a side hustle. There wasn't anything that I was like, they talk about bring the ship close to the dock before you make the jump and all that. There
sure,
there was
sure.
nothing. I just jumped into the ocean, and it
Okay.
literally was like, all right, sink or swim. And so when you start to add that up, like those were some of the challenges, was just what am I going to do? And
Mhm.
essentially what I started doing was I looked at it from the thought process of like, if I was 18 again and had the option to do anything, what would I want to do? Because I honestly, I didn't
Ah,
even know what I wanted to do. And so I tried going back to school. I was doing ride-alongs with the police and the fire department. I was looking at
okay.
going into military, lawyer, all kinds of things. And so I knew that I was going to succeed because I had the support of my wife, and I
Okay.
had the
Yeah.
support of some good family members, not financial support, but the mental, moral support, everything you
Yes.
need going on. And so it made it a whole lot easier to make that leap because I
Mhm.
wasn't being questioned on like, what the heck are you doing?
Okay, good. And I think that's so crucial, right? We think of support systems, and sometimes it's like, you got this, good job, but it goes so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we have, and sometimes it can be closest family members that become naysayers, right?
Mm.
They're not haters, they're not actively working against us, but they can start to undermine. Are you sure about that? That seems a little risky. Those sorts of comments can build up. So it's incredible to hear that you didn't have that, and how that helped support you in that journey, especially taking such a large leap, and a leap into the unknown to a large degree.
Mm.
So, with that, then I think one of the other things that I found, and through having discussions with others, is that mentors will sometimes come into play, whether it be at that stage or at other stages. So I'm wondering then, did you have some mentors who also helped you in your journey?
Yeah, so at that time, I had one really amazing mentor who is still in my life today. He's one of my best friends. He actually was the pastor who married my wife and I.
Oh, that's
And
incredible.
yeah, and so he, when I got back from my tooling around building custom cars, my life
Mhm.
was not great at that time. And
Okay.
I had come home and I'd reached out to him, and this was before I even had the manufacturing job. And I was like,
Okay.
"Hey, can you start meeting up with me? I need some guidance right now. I'm a little lost in life. I got a lot of things going on." So him and I had started meeting once a week
Wow.
prior
Wow.
to any of this, and we met once a week for almost 10 years. And
Wow.
he gave me he was a mentor, but it wasn't like somebody who was telling me what I needed to do. He just
Mhm.
continued to ask questions of like, why is that the route you should go? Why do you feel this way? He was somebody who was just allowing me to come to my own conclusions.
Yes.
And so having that as a sounding board was amazing. And then there's other ways of having mentors that
Hmm.
aren't like what you and I are doing right now, where we're sitting here talking to each other.
Sure.
I
Yes.
started reading a lot, and that came from I had watched some Tony Robbins clip or something on YouTube, and
Okay.
he had mentioned that uh, the top CEOs read 52 books a year. And I was like, man,
Sure.
well, if they're doing that, there must be something to it. And I made a commitment like,
Mm.
all right, I'm going to start reading a book a week. And so that spawned my journey. And so I realized that like through that process, you could dive deep into somebody's content, pick a person, and they become your mentor and your guide through life. And so throughout
Okay.
this transition, even till today, I find somebody who has what I'm trying to do, and I use them, and I just dive into their content, whether that be YouTube or their books or whatnot. And that's essentially some of my biggest mentors have been people I've never even met.
Okay. And I think that is, yeah, that's so relatable. I'm thinking of myself before having met Grant. He served certainly in that role through the
Mm-hmm.
content, watching it, reading some of the material. There's others that I can think of that would fit that same category where maybe it's not one-on-one or even in group setting, but it's reading the content, really diving deep, studying what there is to learn, and then taking the best from, especially if there's multiple mentors, taking the best of each and really adapting it then for ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
making it our own. So I think, well, that's just so relatable there. Um, I'm wondering too. Then you have a very good sense of taking the best from a circumstance, making sure that you have a clear target. Has that always been the case, or is that something you had to grow and develop?
That's definitely something I had to grow and develop.
Mm.
I I kept running into walls when I was younger in my early 20s,
Okay.
and through my other mentor that I was meeting with weekly, I realized you have to come to realize like the only person putting those walls up for you is yourself. And the reason you keep
Mhm.
running into the same wall over and over again is because you're not learning from your previous mistakes. You're not
Okay.
learning from those around you. You're not growing. And so it took a couple years, and I'm still learning and growing at this and learning how to realize like, all right, I've got to own everything that goes on in my life, even if it's not something I can control. Because if I don't own it, then I'm just a victim, and I don't want to be a
Yes.
victim in life. And
Yes.
the things that happen are neither good nor bad; they just are. And so,
Mhm.
if you can remove a lot of the emotion from it, it makes it easier to then handle the problem that's set in front, and then move forward rather than getting upset, breaking down, struggling. You just own it and move forward.
Yes. Okay. I think that's fantastic in the sense of achieving that, and recognizing that that's got to be a work in progress, right? And
Mhm.
as you said, it is a work in progress because there's no way to just flip that switch. So it's consistency. I think probably is one of the items that would stand out in the sense of consistently focusing on that and working towards improving one the awareness on the front end, but then also how do I respond to it, right? I can't
Mhm.
control maybe some things outside, but I can control how I react.
Yeah.
And I think that will
There
serve
is
you
a small
extremely well.
piece too, though. You need to have. I've done a really good job, and I don't know where I learned this from, but I've done a really good job of putting people in my life that
Hmm.
can tell me hard truths. And so you have to be willing to
Uh-huh.
listen to those hard truths and have somebody shoot you straight when you need it.
Yes.
And then not get upset with what they say and move forward. And I don't know, I can't pinpoint where I learned that trait and when I started doing it, but it's been something that I intuitively did, and it has been a major blessing on my journey.
Yeah. Wow. How powerful. I think that's a huge benefit to have those people in your corner, right?
Mm,
And whether they're mentors or supporters, or even just, a family member who's just, they're there for you, right?
mm,
In many of those ways. That then, it really leads into, I think, part of the risk taking calculus, the decision making, having those people to tell it to you straight. Hey, you're off on the side, and it's not, I don't know if you can do it. I don't know. That goal's pretty big, but it's okay. Look, you're maybe now in dangerous territory if that were the case, or why are you making this change? It seems that things are okay, and then it comes back to, as you said with your mentor, letting you find that path. But with that decision making and the risk taking in particular, is there one decision you've made over the course of your life, and in particular in your business and entrepreneurial career, that you would say is the riskiest? It's the one that it was really all on the line.
yeah, I would say the decision to even start. That's
Mm.
probably the most riskiest decision that I've taken.
Okay.
And at the time, it felt like it was the biggest decision of my life. Now looking
Wow.
back, it was minimal. And it's
Mm.
so weird how I put so much into that decision of like, what am I going to do? I'm going to start my own business. This is what I'm going to do. And it seemed like this major, major thing because I've seen people around me start businesses and they've tried different things and they failed and
Oh,
didn't
sure.
succeed. And I never wanted to be somebody who was like, where people were like, oh, look at, he tried doing that business. Now he's back at working a regular job or doing this.
Fear of
And
failure.
so
Sure.
there was this major fear of failure. And once I started, I was like, this is what I was scared of,
Hmm.
was this potential fear of somebody else judging me. Like, I don't freaking
Yeah.
care right now. I've got to figure out how to make this thing work. And when that became my focus, that fear, everything completely disappeared. So as far as like any risky business decisions, I think from the outside, you can look at a lot of what I've done, and
Sure.
somebody who is maybe got like an MBA in business or something would be like, oh, that's a very risky decision. But like, you get one life.
Yeah,
You got to
you
make
do.
decisions. And you, I don't, I've done well not doing what the normal says to do. And
Mm.
that's essentially how I try and move forward and grow, is like, okay, this is what the normal is, and I'll study it and I'll learn everything about it. And then it's like, is that right for me? When really this making this other decision and going against the norm is probably the best decision for me. And so
Mm.
that seems risky on the outside, but to me, I think it's just like it's like breathing.
Yeah, it's clear. It's within your path, your journey, and having that understanding. So then when you're doing that, right, it sounds like you have a framework. You have it, I don't know, risk analysis maybe too formalized, but where you're going through checks and balances and recognizing where does this decision land, and it sounds that as over time you've realized the speed to action, um, recognizing the gravity of a situation, but not putting so much emphasis on the what ifs and more so into let's do it. Let's take the
Mm.
action and roll with it. And we know to be successful relying on our potential.
Yeah, because I think what a lot of people misunderstand is they think that once you make a decision that you're set in stone, but it's not
Mm.
true. If you
No,
make a
it's not.
decision and you just move, there's nothing that says if it's wrong you can't pivot and go the opposite direction. And
Okay.
before I started my business, I was trying to partner. I've started some other smaller businesses before I started the Life Edge, and I've worked with other partners where I had
Mm.
equity
Okay.
in their company, and but I didn't have controlling ownership, so I couldn't make the decisions. And I've
Okay.
watched the fear of a decision halt and slow down the business because they were so scared of making a decision when all they had to do was just choose one, and if it was wrong, then move. And that could have been done in an hour, but instead we spend 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks analyzing something that's now costing us money. And that just never made sense to me. And that was something I learned in the manufacturing company. What the owner was so good at was, here's the problem, we have to go left or right. He like 20 seconds left. That's wrong. Go right. And like he that was something I think I learned there, was the ability to just take action, move forward, and then pivot.
This is Coach Gary. Wanted to take a moment, got to pay some bills here. I wanted to talk to you guys about something that's extremely important to me, and honestly is one of the primary reasons I've had the success so far last year and this year that I have, and that is 10X Health. So before we show you a little information about 10X Health, I wanted to say my energy is up, my clarity is up. I'm down 37 pounds. I've got the go-ahead, that vigor to play with my little girl, to enjoy time with my wife, and I keep looking forward to continuing to improve, and that is in large part thanks to 10X Health. So if you've been feeling that your energy is low, if you don't have that drive, that motivation that you feel that you really should, especially for the guys out there, it's not all about stuff in the bedroom. There's other things that can be fixed, that can be going on. So if you're looking for that, if you feel those things, it's time. 10X Health is your ticket.
And this may be difficult to do, and it's not something we had prepped for even, but I'm just curious if you could maybe quantify what do you think that decision making has done for you as far as maybe time saved or increase percentage of revenues, or maybe just an achievement of a success that, if not for making a decision and making it in a timely fashion and then being able to repeat that as those decision points come, maybe you just never would have reached a certain point. Is there something you could quantify that into?
100% actually. Life Edge would not exist had I not made the decision as quickly and as rapidly as I did. I didn't realize how much of it, like an endeavor I was jumping into, and how much of a struggle it was going to be for a couple years to get this thing going.
Sure.
And so when I had the idea, I literally had the idea about what I wanted to do. I had the vision. I talked to my wife later that day. The next day, I had a domain and was building the website and was moving forward on it. And then I just spent like the next 3 weeks going into it. But I didn't seek out any advice. I didn't seek out it because everyone afterwards, after the fact, was like, it's not that great of an idea. And I'm like, but you can't see the vision. And had I not just jumped on it and started immediately, I think it probably would have never happened because I would have been talked out of what I was trying to do.
Wow. Okay. So trusting yourself, making the decision, and then knowing then through that speed you got into it. And once you're into it, now you've got a hold of the problem, and now you're back to how do we work the problem? Are we going left or right? Versus worrying about what others think or what it may entail, or fear of failure, as we talked on earlier. Okay. Wow. I think that really speaks to your adaptability. Is that fair to say? And then I think also innovation, right? Especially finding an idea. And as you just said, others probably would have talked you out of it for lack of belief in it. That strikes me as extremely innovative. And I'm wondering, how do you stay able to be that flexible and to embrace that, especially now as the business is a little more mature? How do you stay fresh and not getting stuck into corporate, right? Which it's something you'd experienced in the past in other places.
Yeah. And so this is a great question. I actually really enjoy this question.
Good.
I've done a lot in life. I've had a lot of really cool experiences. I've done a lot of mission work in different countries. I used to be a part of a desert racing team. I was the pit crew chief on, and so like some of those
Wow.
decisions were life or death. As far as like if we made a mistake, we were in the middle of nowhere in Mexico. There's no ambulance coming to get you. There's no helicopter, and so when you look back and you compare the decisions I make now to some of the stuff I've had to make decisions on, like it's nothing. Well, maybe I lose money on a decision. Like who cares? Money can be made, money can be earned. It's becoming more and more worthless every day. So it's like, what is it? I would rather life. You only get one life, so I would rather do something that I enjoy doing. I had somebody, I recently changed up some of the guests that I was having on my podcast and broadened what I was doing as far as topics go, and maybe leaving a little bit of the focusing on learning and education. I had somebody ask me like, why did you do that? What's going on? And it was, well, I was getting bored with my own podcast. Not that the guests were boring. I was getting bored with it. And so why would I keep doing something that's boring to me? And again, it goes back to, well, that could be a risky decision. All decisions in life are risky. There's risk in everything. And I forget where I was going with this question, with this answer, because I just got so excited about it. I remember now. So some of this too is I realized that technology, especially with AI and how rapidly AI is coming around, technology is changing everything at a faster rate than you can even imagine. People don't understand it. And there's corporations and things right now that are not pivoting. They're not moving fast enough, and that are going to be obsolete in the next year and a half, 2 years. There's so many businesses right now that are dead that they just don't know it. And I don't want to be that, which requires constant change, constant innovation, constant risk taking. And to me, I want to live a life that's fun and enjoyable. And I'm a risk taker. I've always been a risk taker, quote unquote. And so life is not fun to me if I'm not pushing the envelope of what we're doing. And so that's how I'm constantly like trying to make things or just trying to do new things. If this is how you run social media, great, but I'm going to try doing this, this, and this, and this as well. And maybe some works, some doesn't, but it's enjoyable for me to try new things. I've always worked with my hands, and I'm really good at working with my hands, hence why I went to become a welder. But I didn't realize how creative I was at the time. This is something somebody, again, having good people in your life talk to you. He pointed out, he was like, hey, you used to build custom cars. I was the metal fabricator, and I would just do things like the customer would come in and say, I want this, this, and this, and I could make it. And it was fun, and it was creative. And I didn't realize how creative that was and what kind of talent that required. And I don't want to brag or boast, but what I'm just trying to get is like, we all have the ability to be creative. We may just not see it the same way that everybody else does.
Yes. And that's, it's not painting with acrylics or oils on canvas, but it's so creative. And for those who maybe aren't as familiar with custom fabricating, just as a real brief description, from my understanding, there's no spec sheets. It's the customer has an idea. It's translating that idea oftentimes for them into a drawing or a design, some sort of sketch. And then from that, producing the parts with no rule book, no template even. It is from a thought into a physical being through metalwork.
100%. You nailed it.
Wow. And that I can't even comprehend the creativity that requires, right? And to think of the skill set that requires. And you had said you didn't want to brag, and I don't think you are. I think the way that you tell that, it is an acknowledgement of your skills and how you have applied those, and then recognizing that those very same core fundamental pieces of your being apply in other spaces. And I think sometimes that's where, especially in coaching, I see mentees, they get hung up with that. They're so good at in one area and they just don't see the translation. And that's part of where having a mentor or a coach who can help you to see that and to realize it for yourself, it makes it so much more powerful. And then celebrating also those wins, right?
Mhm.
So I get the sense that you celebrate the wins too. So you have the challenges, you tack them head on, we make our decisions, and then we celebrate them, right?
Yeah.
Hey, that worked. Yes, I'm so happy that worked. Maybe I didn't expect it would, but we went for it anyways. And it's like, man, we got the win. And then when it doesn't work, we acknowledge, okay, what did we learn from it? Is it time to just pivot? We went right and now we can easily go left, or we went right and now we're in a new circumstance, right?
Mhm.
And so now how do we handle that? And what the win from that is, well, we learned something. We learned our decision making process, or our data wasn't all there, or something, so that of every circumstance, there's always a positive takeaway.
Yeah.
Okay.
100. If you're not celebrating your wins, what's the point in living life? Like
Yeah.
what's the point in doing anything if you're not going to take some time to acknowledge when you succeed?
Yes. Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And part of my story is not doing that, and the
Mm.
consequences of that. And I tackle some of that in the kind of autobiography episode I did. But that is so important. I don't think that can be understated, how important it is to do that. And I think that leads kind of then into onto the personal front, right? Work-life balance. And boy, I know that's a loaded term, and I use it every time, and I always think to myself, I've got to find a better way to say it. But I think everybody knows what we mean when we say work-life balance. But I find that many people, especially entrepreneurs, have their own version of what that means, or a complete reversal on this idea of balance itself. So I'm curious to see what are your thoughts on work-life balance, as it were.
So I've had some realizations, even the more and more I think about this concept of work-life balance. I just continue to learn and evolve on my opinion of what I think it is. I don't think there is such thing as work-life balance,
Okay.
because last time I checked, anytime you're doing work, you're still alive. So
Yes.
you don't get to just stop living just because you're working. Now, when I was in doing the manufacturing job, I was trying to accomplish this work-life balance where I'll go work 10 hours a day and then I get home and I'll have 2 hours to hang out with my wife and have fun and do this stuff. And then I'll invest in myself and read for 30 minutes. And then I'll go to the gym and then I'll get a good night's sleep and I'll do it all over again. But it never worked, right? It never worked
Okay.
because I was trying to compartmentalize living and working, and it just didn't work. And when I took it as the perspective of like, no, you're still living life while you're at work, even though you don't enjoy what you're doing, you can still enjoy living. And
Yes.
so when I started to look at even at that manufacturing job and welding and working with people, just doing things that were boring and mundane, I still could have a great conversation with one of my employees. Hey, what's going on in your life right now? What are you struggling with? How can I help? And
Sure.
my wife always calls me problem solver Chris, because I like helping people, I like doing things. And so when I took this approach of like, hey, I'm still alive and I'm still living life at the manufacturing job, um, I started listening to books while I was working. I started listening to podcasts, and I started doing the things that I enjoy while I was accomplishing work. And so
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
living life and working, and then move into today where now I'm in control of my schedule. I get to decide what I do, when I do it.
Yes.
I work weird hours sometimes. I may work from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. because I had a good thought. I woke up and for whatever reason, my brain was firing on all cylinders. So I just put in 3 hours of super productive work. And if
Sure.
I
Sure.
decide that from 8 to 10, I want to go have a coffee, go to the gym, do whatever, like I get to decide that schedule. but I'm always working. You're never not working. Even sleep is work. You're like, your body's
Yes.
repairing itself. You're resting. Where this becomes an issue is for those that entrepreneur wise work themselves into a job. You always have to, as an entrepreneur, you always have to keep thinking like there's a great book called Built to Sell, where you're the
Okay.
way you frame and create your business is like if you could, so that you could sell it, so you could exit it.
Okay.
And that's
Understood.
really when you have like a really good business, is when you can take yourself out of it and walk
Yes.
away. But if you build this business and create this business where it doesn't function if you're not pouring 12, 15, 17 hours a day into it, Monday through Sunday, that's not like that's not work-life balance. That's not anything. That's just you built a job that is impossible to do, that's just going to kill you, that's making life miserable. Like
Yeah.
it isn't, oh, I need to find a work-life balance. It's like, no, you need to hire somebody.
You need to find life.
Yeah.
And I think so that's one of the things that we talk on too is like working on versus in the business. It tends to be how I frame that and how I've learned it, in the sense of, if you're working in the business, you're in a job, and it's okay. There's always tasks that are in the business, no matter what level you're at, even as the owner. But as the business grows, it truly becomes a business when, as you said, right, you hire someone. You're able to scale to duplicate yourself. That first time you duplicate yourself, now you have a business. As you continue to grow that to where you could not show up and everything would still function, then you have a business, right?
Yep.
And that then is an enterprise, and it has value inherent to itself. And of course, you're still valued within it. You're a key member, you're a driver, you're the visionary, whatever your role within your company is there. But if we can't walk away even for a moment, then I think you're absolutely right. One, you've lost life. You're just working. And then two, it's a job, and it's a crappy job. You don't even get time off, right? And not everybody needs the same amount of time off, but there's always those times where we need to walk away to help a family member, to have that break and that vacation. And if we just simply can't do it, what's the point, right? We've eliminated everything else from our lives. So I think that's a great perspective on it. And I think in that you had some habits and some mindsets or just approaches to life that are inherent to that, right? Looking for the positive, looking to live every moment of life. And I think that, especially, I mean, here in the US, let's be honest, that's rare. It's so easy to fall into, I heard it called the rat race. I don't know that I like that so much as just falling into a sense of normalcy. And if we think of 10x and the levels of action, average, right? It's what's expected. It's not great. I don't love it. It's not amazing, but I'm not below standard, and I'm just kind of doing what I'm supposed to. And that average, I think, is the most dangerous. So your approach then really seeks to break out of that.
I think too, there's some, how do you identify yourself? Do you identify yourself as worthy of a good life? Because when some of what I had to overcome to even start my business to become was, at the time, those first few years, I enjoyed all the entrepreneurship and everything of growing that manufacturing company, but I didn't feel worthy of anything more than what I had. And I don't know where that came from. Probably the 18 years of programming from school. But I just didn't, I didn't feel like, even though I felt I had all this potential, I knew I had potential. There was this whole negative side of my identity that said, you don't deserve that. You're not worth that. And that was, looking back, that was some of the biggest mindset shift I had to go through in order to really make the change. And I see that with some of the work-life balance stuff that people are always striving for, is some of the people that I see struggle with it the most, that can't figure out how to live life because I have to work so much, they identify as what they do. rather than
Okay.
identifying as being a person. So I identify as being a welder, which means I have to weld, and welders are hard, tough, miserable people, and this and that, and blah, blah,
Mm.
blah. And it's like, no, you are Jason, you are Sam, you are Catherine, you are you, and who is a welder, who is the store clerk bagging groceries, who is whatever your job is, but you are
Yeah.
still that human being that is valuable and deserves to live a good life.
Yeah. Wow. And I think that transcends it then, right? Because no matter the circumstance, we have inherent value as people. And that tying to that is maybe less clear, more uncomfortable than tying to something like my job. I see
Yeah.
my job. There's expectations with my job. People know, right? And I think of being a CPA, right? CPAs are boring, they're dull, they just sit in a cubicle and work all day. And I remember there were days where it was easier to take on that persona than it was to want to be different than that in those moments. And that's part of what took me on my path out of CPA. But I think that there's also extreme value in recognizing doesn't necessarily mean you have to leave where you're at. It means you have to get comfortable with who you are with where you're at. And that then can lead to some incredible success in any circumstance, whether it's positive, negative, or otherwise. And with those successes, then we look to oftentimes leave a legacy or leave an impact on the world. And I'm curious to see, and I imagine it's fairly grand from how you carry yourself and how you've been talking so far of that journey and that impact that maybe you'd like to leave, a legacy, if you will.
So earlier I mentioned that I had done a lot of mission work growing up.
Yes.
And I spent about a month in South Africa with a group of people. We were building an orphanage there in this really like impoverished town. One of the ones where people are eating they get food once a week from the charity.
Wow.
They've got to walk 3 miles each way to get dirty drinking water, not clean drinking water, just dirty drinking water. So like
true hardship, true
exactly.
challenges.
And so we spent a month there. We built an orphanage, but we also, as a group, raised $1 million to bring and help the town was called Mafeking in South Africa. And since then, we were the spark that has taken that area, put it on the map, and they've grown. And now because of that, they're this thriving area that is sending kids to the States to come and go to college and get an education, to then they go back and they're building these businesses and they're just growing this area, and they've completely taken so many of these people out of poverty.
Wow.
I say that for two reasons. I realized then how blessed we were to be in the country that we are, and the opportunities. I didn't realize it then. I've since realized on that journey that how blessed we are. Even with all of America's faults and everything it has going on, we're still the greatest country with the greatest opportunity for success.
I agree.
The other thing is money makes an impact. A lot of money used well makes an impact. And I was given an opportunity, and I've been given talents, and I've been given potential to help others. And I wanted to. Welding was great. I was making decent money. Even at the time, I was donating to charities and things like that. But I knew that I had the ability to go out and succeed on levels that most people can't even fathom when you start talking about numbers. Because when you're at the time, I was average, like you talked about. I was living in average, and so when you start talking above average, you get deemed the crazy person. And so
you stuck your head out. Yes.
Exactly. And it becomes the game of whack-a-mole. Well, I just continued getting my head whacked, and I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to keep doing this until I succeed. And I knew that I had all this potential, and I wanted to do something that left a mark on the planet. It doesn't necessarily mean that, my last name or my name needs to be glorified or anything like that. I just realized if I have inherent value and I'm valuable as a human, so do other people, which means the only thing that really matters on this earth is like people, and how do you help them? Because that's all there is. And money doesn't matter. You don't get to take it with you when you go. Material things don't matter. All this stuff doesn't matter. But the impact I can leave on other people, on the world, that matters. And so essentially that's why I started Life Edge. I used online courses and coaching to get to where I am today. But I also realized there was a lot of scams. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. And so I wanted to create a platform where people could go and they know that they're getting a quality product or a quality service. And through that, they can change their life. And so with the Life Edge, we have a mission of helping 1 million people change their lives. So every time we help sell a coaching program or an online course, we're helping one person change their life. And right now, the goal is 1 million, but really, I would love to help 10, 20, 30, 100 million people really change their lives, step out of the life that they don't enjoy, where they're searching for work-life balance that doesn't exist, and to help people actually understand that there's opportunity for them to live a good life, make good money, and leave an impact on the world as well.
That's awesome. That is simply incredible. And know that in your journey to the 1 million, I'm with you. In your journey to the 10, I'm with you. And in the journey to the 100, I'm with you. And I think that is so incredible to set out such a grand goal and really have it to where it can pull you towards it, right? Because those are massive goals and they're very achievable through consistency and a lot of hard work that goes into it. But I think you see it certainly, and I think others see it as well. The potential is certainly there. So as we wrap up, wondering what's the best way that the listeners, that the audience can reach out to you at the Life Edge? Is it social media? Do you have a link that is the best place to get in touch with you and start to be one of those 100 million?
Yeah, so thelifeedge.com, just Google The Life Edge. We'll be the first ones that come up. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, but we're really trying to start a community where people can talk, ask questions, engage with me. That's on a different app. It's a new app that's coming out, but start at thelifeedge.com. That's probably the best way. That's our hub. That's our website. That's where you can find all the courses, the coaches, and then we have obviously all our links to everything else, our email list, all that is on the website.
Okay. So go to the website, make sure that you're in touch, that you subscribe on social and get those updates to really then join that community as it comes lives and launches, and really then go all in as not just 1 in 1 million, but 1 in 100 million, and continue to make that impact so that we can make those impacts ourselves and really then expand the value or build upon that inherent value that we each have. So, Chris, I wanted to thank you for coming on today. This has been an incredible conversation. Excited for this one to come live. And if you're listening today and you want to get more connected with the group, please follow Chris, get connected, make sure you invest in yourself. It's so important, whether it be reading or courses. As a coach, of course, I'm biased here, but I'm going to promote that at all times. So please reach out to Chris and make sure you have those opportunities. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Chris, for coming on today.
Yeah, Gary, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, we'll see you all very soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Grow with Gary. You're officially one step closer to crushing your business goals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Connect with Gary by reaching out on social media at McHughGrowth or online at mchugrowth.com/podcast. And be sure to include a comment with your top takeaway. Until next time, this has been Grow with Gary.